Welcome to Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a 19-year-old son, Joey, who is in recovery from addiction and who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Cindy McQuay, an adoptee from Pennsylvania, who is the co-founder of Hiraeth Healing Retreats for adoptees, DCPs, LDAs, and NPEs. Now don't worry if you don't know any of those acronyms. We will go over them in this episode. And stick around to the end of the episode and I will let you know when the upcoming retreats are for spring, summer, and fall 2023. Cindy was a baby scoop era domestic infant adoptee. I should say she still is. And she had a rather idyllic childhood with well-informed and open adoptive parents, which was somewhat unusual at the time. Besides her work for Hiraeth, she advocates for adoption law reform and educates the public about separation trauma. So welcome to Unraveling Adoption, Cindy. I'm glad to have you on the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Help me unravel this. For those that don't know, what is the baby scoop era?
The baby scoop era started with war babies. Women were pregnant. There was an abundance of babies.
Unexpected pregnancy.
Husbands were away, so there may have been affairs, or because their husbands were away, they couldn't care for a child. So there became an abundance of babies that were, in essence, scooped up and relinquished and adopted out.
So this is the 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah. And actually, I think they still used it even into the late 60s, early 70s, that they used the term.
And the scoop part is like, whoop, we're just going to scoop you out of there.
Correct.
Is that what we're talking about? Oh, my God.
Correct. But also, don't forget, it was also during a time where for women to be pregnant and unmarried was shamed upon. So again, these babies were just scooped away. Mm-hmm. There were several doctors. Georgia Tann looked for women in these precarious predicaments and would just find women to prey on to scoop these babies away.
Yeah. Oof, it just hurts. So what was your upbringing like? So your adoptive parents were the recipients of this baby scooping era. And what were they like? How was your childhood?
My parents were in their 30s, so they were older parents.
Yeah, that must have seemed old at that time. Now it's kind of like middle.
Right. And they first adopted my older brother, not bio-related, and then me. And then they had 2 bio children of their own. Mm-hmm. So we all are just about 2 years apart in age. We're all very close. We grew up being treated equally. I grew up with cousins adopted, friends in the neighborhood adopted. We used to joke that there must have been something in the water to cause all the infertility in our neighborhood, that I grew up knowing so many other adoptees. So adoption was very much of a normal way of life for me. Mm-hmm. It was discussed, which was absolutely unheard of for the most part with my generation. Mm-hmm. Most of those parents were told not to tell their children. They'd never find out and to just
pretend like
go on with life.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, we looked similar. You wouldn't question that we were not all siblings. Mm-hmm. It isn't until now that I look at us as we're aging or as we started to age, like the late 20s, I think when you really start to get your own face, I can really see the bio siblings, how much they really do resemble my parents.
But you all have the same coloring or
yes.
like hair color or whatever, basic stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. And what made your parents so different from millions of other adoptive parents?
I have no idea. And I need to ask my mother that. Mm-hmm. Why? Maybe it's because I was always inquisitive. I was always asking questions and I was never suppressed. Mm-hmm. I was very much supported. And this was even with the other siblings. Mm-hmm. These were open discussions that we would have. So maybe because that was my MO and always has been, my mother found out early on that I and my adoption were not a threat to her.
Okay, that's good.
Because a lot of the adoptive parents are threatened when the child wants answers or wants to search for the bio family. That's the only thing I can really think of, is that she just found out early on that I could ask a question and then, turn around and I love you, Mom, that sort of thing.
Nice.
And it was more just my being inquisitive that calmed her.
Nice. Well, she sounds amazing. I would love to meet her someday. And do you remember finding out you were adopted, or did you just know from day one? Do you remember her telling you?
I always knew. I don't have any recollection of a specific time. I grew up with some of the ones that are my age will remember this book, The Chosen Baby.
Oof.
This is my original book that I colored in.
Oh, wow.
And I remember this being read to us as kids all the time.
It's a little children's book.
It's the stupidest thing now when I go back and read it. And I just laugh at it. But this, I do know my mother told me, was suggested to read to us because there probably was not much of anything else. And it's just so silly now when I read it. But I was never told any of the stuff in this book by my mother. This very much followed the grateful and we chose you and that stuff. So I only ever heard that from this book.
Wow. But at the time, it felt very positive to you, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you're looking at the language is a little,
Oh, it's it's comical.
But back then, that was probably pretty good.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that was probably the only thing that might have been available for parents.
Wow. Now there's so many books, some good and some bad, but there's a million books. That's good. And did you ever try to find your bio parents?
I did. I could not wait to turn 18 because, as we know, an adoptee cannot get any information until they are 18. Yep. And even still now, some states, you still can't get any information.
So horrible.
So I could not wait till I turned 18. Headed right down to the adoption agency and met with a social worker. And she slid me, across the table, non-identifying information.
Okay.
And I can't do the math that quick, but that was 40 some years ago.
Okay.
Fast forward to 2017 when Pennsylvania opened up, allowing me to get a copy of my original birth certificate.
Wow. Took that long. Wow.
So I had the non-identifying information, which for the most part matched most of the information that my parents had for me. Mm-hmm. It had additional information that they didn't have. But again, it's non-identifying. So there's nothing in there that would identify your birth parents.
So no names or dates,
none of that.
Or places.
So that satisfied me for a while. You get that. And then every now and then I would get the itch again and I would write to the social worker. Could you reach out and see if they want contact? So the social worker always would act as the intermediary and contact my maternal grandmother. So she was the gatekeeper for quite some time. And it was always, no, your birth mother has moved on with her life, never told her now husband about you, blah, 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 that stuff. Yeah. So again, I would still do this every couple of years.
Just check in.
My maternal grandmother finally passed away. And so now they went right to my birth mother, who again wanted no contact. So it was not until the direct-to-consumer DNA test became available. I hopped on that bandwagon.
Like 23andMe, that kind of thing. Okay.
And was very quickly and easily able to identify both maternal and paternal.
Wow.
So neither still want any contact. I am in contact with a few aunts, uncles, cousins. So I always tell people, it doesn't hurt to reach out.
Yeah.
Some will want contact, some may not. It's not a reflection of me. I personally feel that my birth mother never dealt with her own trauma.
Yeah.
And that's her reason. But
absolutely. Well, I think so many birth moms, their baby was scooped away and they were just supposed to go on with their life and no one offered them therapy or maybe this might give you some grief. I don't know. Maybe somebody could have thought of that. No. They just said, okay, go on with your life now.
Right.
Pretend this never happened.
Well, one of the first adoption books I read was The Girls Who Went Away.
Yes.
And I never thought of the birth mother's perspective. Yes. That is such an important book to read because, like you just said, they were told, just forget this ever happened.
Yeah.
Being a mother myself, I don't know how anybody could ever expect you to just forget it ever happened.
It's unreasonable. I feel so sad. And obviously it impacts you quite a bit. You've never even met her or talked to her on the phone, right?
Mm-mm.
Just no contact. Yeah. So just the layers of sadness and trauma that lack of attention to the birth mother's pain. It's just,
Yeah.
it's just exponential. And then your children aren't able to have a relationship with, it goes on and on generationally.
For sure.
Well, okay. So you had, quote unquote, a good adoption. It sounds like you had a good childhood, lots of adoptees in your life. Adoption wasn't stigmatized. I hear people say, but what about so-and-so? They had a good adoption. Adoption can't be traumatic because I know somebody that had a good one. What do you say to people that talk like that?
Just because I had a good adoption or a good childhood, put it that way, doesn't mean that I don't experience the trauma that my fellow cribmates do.
Yeah.
Mine, fortunately, was, I want to say recognized, but in a non-termed way back then. Because the separation trauma has just become, and not real recently, but certainly not when I was a child.
Okay.
So I always and still have stomach issues. My mother, you'll hear me keep saying my mother because she was a stay-at-home mom. So my mom did most of, the rearing. My dad was very much in the picture, but you hear me talk more about my mom.
Okay. Sure.
That was offered as a possibility with these stomach issues.
Oh.
I got migraines. That was also offered as a possibility.
So she knew that those physical symptoms might have to do with your adoption and your separation?
Correct.
Wow. She's amazing.
But it was a mothering thing with her. And I think also because I had the advantage of them having to bio kids in the picture, I think it gave my mother a whole different perspective. Okay, here's two of my bio kids who don't have these issues. And here's my two adopted, even though we were never referred to that way.
Yeah.
But here's my two adoptive kids that have these issues. Is there possibly something? So that was talked about. And that's why I say the traumas were there, but they weren't termed that. My mother would just say, I wonder if this has something to do with you being adopted, you thinking about your bio family, us discussing it.
Well, that totally makes sense. I'm just kind of shocked because even still nowadays, adoptive parents are reticent to talk about their birth family or to talk about pain associated with adoption. They're so defensive a lot of times. So I'm just super impressed with your mom.
Yeah.
Bravo.
I mean, she would ask, it's like, it's a shame, Cindy, that we don't know whether migraines ran in your family.
Run in the family.
I mean, she would say things like that to me.
Yeah. Oh, it's very validating. And she's, questioning along with you, which is lovely. None of us know. Wouldn't it be nice if we knew?
Right.
Yes, obviously. Wow. Well, thank you for that. And I am happy when people have quote unquote good adoptions. Obviously, we want people to have wonderful childhoods and great adoptive families. And I think it's really important for everyone to understand that no matter how awesome your adoptive family is, there's going to be trauma. When you have a separation from a birth parent, you're going to have trauma.
Right. I get so frustrated with social media now when I see so many of these adoptive parents saying, my child doesn't have any trauma. And I think, yeah, they do. A, they haven't recognized it yet, or B, they're never going to tell you. It's so important that adoptive parents know we are like chameleons. We've had to adapt. Our entire life has been turned upside down. Even if, like me, I ended up in a good situation. My entire life, what I knew for 9 months is night and day. Sounds are different, smells are different. Everything is totally different. So we learn to adapt. And if you don't have that rapport with your child from the get-go, they're not going to tell you stuff. They're not.
They might try some little thing. And if you react like, ugh, then they'll be like, oh, I guess I can't talk about that.
Which is why I am so fortunate that I had other adoptees to talk to. So, again, I feel for so many of these adoptees that never knew another adoptee until social media came around.
Social media helps a lot. There's a lot of support groups and things.
Or they happen to find when the internet first started an adoption group to get into. But I always had, if it wasn't my brother to talk to, it was a kid down the street or somebody on the school bus or in school. Always had somebody to talk to about adoption.
That's so nice. And you probably had no idea that was so advantageous for you at the time. You just thought everybody had that. But
I did.
I bet growing up, you realize, and talking to other adoptees on the internet, you realize, oh, my experience was not typical.
No. And like I said, I'm shocked at how many never were allowed to discuss it or had anybody to discuss it. Because as a kid, I can't think of what age, 4 or 5, whatever. You're questioning things. And if you're constantly being told, well, I'm your mother. Don't you love me? Aren't you grateful that we adopted you? You just shut it down. You don't say anything.
Shut it down. Yep. It's hard to open up again. Wow. Now, since you had such a positive experience, what prompts you to be an activist to help other people? What turned that on for you? Or when did that happen for you?
When DNA tests became available, I started getting into helping other adoptees search for their bio parents. So I got really into being a search angel.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And then in doing that, I would get somewhat of a connection with some of these other adoptees and see how a lot of them had horrible upbringings. So that just started me thinking, why are we even adopting?
Yeah.
It doesn't even need to be done. Again, a lot of my stuff came with maturity. And now I'm a mother and I'm thinking, how horrible that we are not looking to see if there's other family members that we can keep this child within the same family. And if it's not possible, why are we doing adoptions? Why aren't we doing guardianship? Why are we totally stripping away these kids' identities, birth names, culture, everything, all for the sake of adults? We're not thinking of the children. That's what I would say came with being a mother myself, and then just putting a lot more logic into what's an alternative.
Kind of thinking out of the box. Now, can you explain what's the difference between adoption and guardianship?
I am not a lawyer, but adoption would be my parents are listed as my birth parents. So I have 2 birth certificates. One is invalid and one is valid, listing them as my birth parents. Guardianship would sort of be like if you went on vacation and you gave somebody permission to take your kid to the doctor, although I'm sure there's a lot more in a legal guardianship, but it would not erase the kids' names or their birth certificate. Now, some states actually do adoption certificates instead of birth certificates.
Oh, well, that's an improvement.
So it lists the new parental figures as adoptive parents as opposed to birth parents. So technically, my birth certificate is a legally falsified document.
Right.
It's false. It's a lie.
Which is kind of crazy because legal documents are supposed to be truthful. Like you raise your right hand or...
I mean, you do jail time for falsifying documents.
Yeah, exactly. I like that when they put 4 parents on there, it makes it seem very clear and truthful and all the data is right there. And this idea that birth parents can hide anymore is completely irrelevant with DNA now.
Correct.
So there's no more hiding or privacy. All that's gone. So for better or for worse.
But I think it would make a lot of these kids feel like they matter. I didn't consent to it. I didn't consent to having my name changed. And I just think if we have to do it, that it still validates that I matter, that what my birth mother took the time to name me matters. The last name I was given matters.
I think everyone can agree that there will always be some children that can't be raised by their birth parents.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, probably will never go away, but can we keep them closer? Like, for instance, what I did, I drug my child halfway across the globe from Japan, changed his name, took away his language, took away all of those smells and tastes that he grew up with and for the first 7 months of his life and in utero. And that is just layer upon layer of loss for him. And was there no one else in Japan, no other family members that could have kept him closer? But in the case of Japan, they wanted adoptees out of the country. They very much wanted them out because of the stigma of unwed mothers. They're kind of where we were in the 50s and 60s regarding that, as far as I can tell. But yeah, my poor Joe, got ripped away from everything. So I also, like you, advocate for family preservation whenever possible. Is there some second cousin? Is there some aunt, somebody in their family, so they're not losing their whole lineage. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I totally think we need to do away as much as possible with the international adoptees.
Oh, it's so fraught
It's
with
horrible.
ethical issues.
It's horrible.
It really is.
And like you said, that adds a whole additional layer of trauma to the already existing trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the intercountry adoptees and transcultural, transracial, there's so many changes. My ex-husband is Japanese American, so he had half of his family was Japanese, but not the language, not the food. So yeah, the intercountry adoptions is just fraught.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Korean adoptees have been going at it. They're telling the government, hey, you guys do not protect us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really pleased to see that there's been some action on that front.
Right.
Linnell, along with Intercountry Adoptee Voices, is doing amazing work with that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that my generation adoptees, we're all grown up now and we're out there letting the world know, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah, we need to listen to adult adoptees. Don't just look at the neighbor down the street that has a charming 8-year-old that thinks adoption is cool. Let's talk to the adults that have lived it, have thought deeply about it, gotten some therapy for it or whatever, gotten on their healing path. Let's talk to them and see, how was that for you? What do you wish was different? Let's listen.
And for everybody in the back, surrogacy is the exact same thing.
Oh, that's another can of worms, isn't it?
Yep.
Surrogacy. Yeah, because you're separating from the birth mother.
Right.
It's a separation. It's like when our neighbor had puppies, those puppies stayed with that mom for, 8 or 10 weeks, but we don't do the same thing for human babies.
Not at all.
Ridiculous. And yeah, so there's just so much. Well, one thing that you are doing besides your activism work, which is awesome, you co-created Hiraeth. Can you tell us, what is Hiraeth? What does it mean? And what kind of retreats do you put on? What is that group doing?
The organization is Hiraeth Hope and Healing. And I co-founded it with an actual very distant biological cousin, Erin.
Really? I didn't know you were a cousin.
Yeah. One of those things, after we had met in person at a meetup, we were like, oh, this was really fun, but it wasn't long enough. Let's plan one. And it was for NPEs, which that was an acronym used early on, which stands for not parent expected or non-parental event. And it's basically people who take a DNA test for fun and find out their birth certificate father is not, in fact, their biological father. So they're popping up all over the place.
Yeah, more and more.
And again, the DNA tests have led to people finding out that they're late discovery adoptees.
LDA.
As well as donor conceived.
DCP.
So if you take a DNA test, be prepared to Google support because you may end up with a surprise.
Yeah, don't they make you sign off knowing that? But everyone's like, no, it won't happen to me. I know who my family is.
Yeah. So we held our first retreat in October of 2019, which was just for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And again, it wasn't long enough. So we are now holding them 3 times a year throughout the country. We get together on a Thursday night and they go till Monday morning. Okay. And we host them. We bring in therapists. We hold 6 to 7 different sessions. They're never the same. And we max out at 30 attendees. We like to keep it small and intimate. They're always hosted in a private home because we feel that even cooking together, drinking coffee together is very healing. So these are open to adoptees, donor conceived folks, the late discovery adoptees, and the NPEs. We have found that although we are all different, we absolutely have intersecting areas. Yeah. And we've all learned a lot from each other. So everybody needs to find their people and some place that they can feel safe. So hopefully that's what we are offering. Hiraeth, you asked me what that means. Hiraeth is a Welsh word that if you look up the word Hiraeth, it can't really be defined. It's a longing for a home from which you never came from. So it's one of those words that you can't really describe, but it's been used in the adoption community for some years because of how so many of us feel, and myself included for sure in this, of being hatched, found under a rock, literally dropped from the sky, because we have no birth story. I don't have, that, oh, I was in labor with you, for 18 hours and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So the word really resonates. We don't know what we're longing for. What is it? What was it? And that's also why you will find a lot of adoptees despise their birthdays, because why celebrate the day that your own mother gave you away?
It's possibly the worst day of your life. And everyone's like, why aren't you happy?
Right.
Ugh, that's such a disconnect. It's so cool that you've opened it up to the donor conceived, DCPs, LDAs, late discovery, and NPEs. And was that always in the plans, or did you add them as you went along? Why not just adoptees?
Well, Erin is an NPE. So if we were going to do this together,
it had to be at least adoptees and NPEs.
Right. And actually, the function that we met at, I was the only adoptee. And I felt, even though I was welcomed and I'd been part of this group for a while, so it wasn't like it was my first thing with them. But I remember I had said to Erin, wow, a couple of the activities they did, I couldn't even participate in because they didn't even think of the adoptees or donor conceived people that may have attended. So it was very important for us to make sure that whatever your status, that you are included. And we're very deliberate with our facilitators. We always try to have from within the community, but that they are aware that there will be all these different statuses involved, so that you can't just be speaking to adoptees or donor conceived people. Everybody needs to feel welcomed. Yeah,
there's probably some vocabulary training that you need to make sure the facilitators, steer clear of these certain words that will leave certain people out. Can you give us an example of something that might leave one of your group out?
Well, the separation trauma, for one, that is speaking clearly and solely to adoptees. Because the NPEs aren't going to experience that. They grew up with their birth mothers.
Yeah.
But the NPE community and the donor conceived as well acknowledge that. And they're okay with it because it is the biggest part of our trauma. I guess it's just not just focusing totally on one of the aspects of those people's status, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. What is the biggest issue that people come to the retreats with? What's holding people back, or what are they coming to the table with? What are they looking for?
They're looking for community, for one, in-person community. They're looking for the facilitators, the sessions, the variety of sessions. Now, the sessions we do, I guess I should talk on that for a tad, because everybody heals in a different way.
Yeah.
So we've had music therapy, play therapy, inner child work, Reiki, drumming. We do the earthy crunchy, the whole 9 yards. We've had trauma therapists talk about what it does to your body, how you can work through, like if something triggers you. Erin always says that she likes to leave people with a never-ending Mary Poppins bag.
Nice.
We're going to fill it up for you, but that you'll always have tools to grab from.
That's a lovely image.
And we've had not only repeat attendees, but repeat facilitators, but they never facilitate on the same thing. So no retreat is ever going to be the same as another one.
So you could go to all the retreats and never get bored.
Correct. You're going to still get some more tools to put in your Mary Poppins bag.
I love that. And I love my tools. I'm all about tools. Have you ever had an unexpected outcome from a retreat attendee? Did it ever totally trigger someone? They went overwhelmed and, did it make things worse? Have you ever had anything, or maybe someone had an extremely significant healing, experience?
We've had both on both sides. I can think of two examples, and obviously I'm not going to name names, but during COVID, we offered online for some of the attendees.
Yeah, because you started this right before COVID, didn't you?
Yeah.
Like you said, fall of 2019.
That was our first. And then the spring one, we could not hold because of COVID. So then I think it was that fall, that October, we came back and offered online.
An online one? Okay.
But one of the attendees who was doing it online, and again, I think we offered online 3 retreats.
Okay.
So I couldn't even remember which one it was specifically. So she was in her home by herself. And I'm pretty sure it was inner child work. So the session's over, Zoom is off, and she told us afterward that she had an absolute breakdown and had nobody there with her. Okay, so that was a learning curve for us. We didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
So we have what we call a safe space. We don't do the online anymore at all.
Okay.
I don't know if we will go back to ever offering that. But if we did, we would have to totally think about what sessions were being offered. Mm-hmm. So it is very important that we make sure that if somebody does have a trigger, that we have somebody there who's competent to be with them.
Yep.
So then on the other end of it, we have had, surprisingly enough, the drumming. I don't know if you've ever done drumming.
I am a drummer.
Oh.
I play taiko drums, Japanese drums, and it makes me cry all the time. I'm not surprised that drumming got somebody emotional.
Oh, yeah. That was at one of the very first retreats. And when this facilitator pulled out her drum, we were all like, what the heck is this? Erin was the only one that I think was really familiar with it. So we're shut our eyes and she's walking around the room, drumming near us and, getting louder and louder. And oh my God, everybody loved it. There was 2 or 3 people who were absolutely in tears and said that they'd never had such a visceral reaction. Like that everything they'd been holding in just released.
I believe it.
So anytime we can have a drummer there, we do that.
I love it.
Oh, it is.
When I'm drumming, I feel like it's a jackhammer that's just breaking up all the stuckness.
Yep.
And it literally, you feel it in your body, especially with anything loud. Literally, you're feeling the vibrations.
Oh, yeah.
Like an earthquake through your body. And yeah, if anything's stuck in there, it'll get pulled out.
Oh, for sure.
For good or bad.
Yep.
Mostly it's good. Oh, that's beautiful. I love drumming. Well, I'm sure are you a nonprofit organization?
We're pending right now. Yes.
Pending. You probably have some challenges. What is your biggest challenge right now? And is it something we could help with?
Our biggest challenge probably is getting the word out, even though we put it out there on social media, is that we offer scholarships.
Oh, okay.
I think we've only had one person ever apply for one. It's kept anonymous. So it's not like, Beth, you're on scholarship. People aren't going to know that. And finding, now this you can't really help with. I'm like the VRBO queen for finding these amazing houses that we host them in.
Because they got to sleep 30 people, you said, right?
At least.
So you're finding mansions, basically, right?
We do share bedrooms, but, it's finding the affordability. So I'm hoping that once we are a nonprofit, that there's funding out there that will allow us the funds to be able to host them in bigger homes.
So if anyone has a giant home you'd like to donate for a weekend or something, let Cindy know. That's amazing. Or maybe somebody knows somebody, you never know. Maybe somebody will call you up with a lead for a home. That's amazing. And you don't do them for kids, right? These are only for adults.
Adults, correct.
So is it 18 and up, or you really want them to be like grown up?
I'm okay with 18. I think the youngest we have had has been like a 22, 23-year-old.
Okay. Yeah, I bet people aren't really ready for something like that until they've kind of gotten settled in their life. And
I think, and the younger ones that we're seeing are usually the NPEs. They're not the adoptees. Because most of the adoptees are not going to recognize their trauma until it hits them smack in the face.
Yes.
That phrase of coming out of the fog, which generally is not going to be late 20s, early 30s, if not even older.
Yeah, I feel kind of grateful that Joey's understanding the role that his adoptions had on his life. He's only 19 and he's been working on his for a couple of years already. So I'm like, Joey, there's 50-year-olds that really have no idea and haven't faced it yet. And you are doing it now. So before you have kids and a job and a house and, there's no better time, I think. Just get her done, work on it now.
Yeah. And you're validating it. That's half of the battle, is the people around us validating.
Oh, it's extremely difficult work he's doing. And it's just painful. That's why I suppose adoptees wait till they're in their 50s or as long as they can. Because it's like, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to open that Pandora's box because, as soon as you start looking, it's going to be impossible to close it up again.
But see, if everybody did it somewhat close to the way my parents did, it's not as in your face.
Right. You kind of came out of the fog all along, right?
Correct.
You didn't have like a moment in time where you're like, oh, it's the adoption. It just was part of it. You recognized the pain and the good parts all along.
Right. It was never called separation trauma.
Yeah. So there's some words, but that's minor compared to the feeling of being validated for all of your different feelings. So, well, that's definitely one of the many reasons I have this podcast, Unraveling Adoption. Let's unravel it. Let's help everyone understand it. So the teachers and the ministers and the doctors and all the therapists and everybody understands how complicated this stuff is. So we can be there to support our adoptees from day one, right? And for whatever stage they're in. Is there anything else you'd like to say about adoption in general, about Hiraeth, or anything else that I missed?
I could talk about adoption forever, just because I think there's so many things that do need to be said. I think it's very important that non-adoptees, and not just adoptive parents, but non-adoptees, listen to us. And I think you had said, like, my neighbor's mailman's cousin's sister has an adopted kid and they're fine.
Yeah.
I'm not out here spouting my mouth off for no reason. There is a reason. So listen to us and don't tell us to be grateful, and don't tell us we could have been aborted.
That's so painful.
I personally cannot stand the gotcha day phrase. So I'll leave it on that. I can't stand that phrase.
I admit I used that phrase until I came out of the fog. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. So now we just don't even mark the day. I mark it for myself because it was a happy day for me, but I don't even bring it up to Joy at this point. But I use that phrase. I feel terrible about that. And I've told Joy I'm sorry 100 times.
Yeah. I mean, and if you even think about that, it's horrible to even.
Yeah. Gotcha. I gotcha.
Yeah. I caught you. I got you.
Yeah.
But I see so many adoptive parents, even some friends of mine who've, celebrating it's gotcha day. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I'm glad that you stopped doing that.
I stopped, but that's why I want to help parents figure this out before I did. That's for sure. I could never figure out why he didn't ever want to celebrate Gotcha Day. I'm like, what the heck, Joy? Let's go to a Japanese restaurant. Let's celebrate Japan. We had such a great time going to get you. And I never thought about his perspective. Duh. Now I feel like, God, I was such an idiot. But I'm trying to be kind to myself. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't have someone like you telling me that would be painful to hear as an adoptee. So adoptive parents and people around adoptees, Gotcha Day.
Right.
Bye-bye. We can call it Family Day or Adoption Day, but still it's a fraught holiday. It's a holiday for the adoptive parents, really, not for the kid. It's a pretty sad day for the kid.
Another thing I can add in is stop telling your kids stories when they're babies. I can't stand seeing on social media them going to court the day that the adoption is finalized.
Oh, yeah.
You may have a child that is not ready to tell the world that they are adopted.
Yeah. Or they might want to tell it their own way. Oh.
Right. It's our stories. They're our stories.
Yeah. Especially with the little ones. They have no idea what you guys are doing. And then social media is just going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. Everything you put on about your kids. I think that's in general about people's kids. I think that a lot of stuff gets on the internet that, ooh.
But see, those videos to me, they glorify adoption.
Oh, yeah. It's a celebration. Yeah.
Because look at everybody's so happy and blah, blah, blah. And
yes.
No.
Oh, those are painful. I agree with you. Those are tough. Yeah. Once you kind of get out of the fog or whatever and really see the totality of adoption or more of it, bigger picture, stuff like that can be pretty painful. But man, it's hard because adoptive parents are so excited. From our perspective, it's like, yay, my family is quote unquote complete now, but let's think beyond ourselves and try to think about how it feels for the adopted person and how they will feel when they're 20 or whatever in looking back at this. So
it's a shame that the adoption agencies or adoption attorneys, brokers, however the children are being adopted, don't actually have adult adoptees to mentor these adoptive parents.
Yeah, they should be much more involved for sure.
That just makes no sense to me that the industry does not have us as spokespersons to be helping where we're needed.
Yep. I think they just look at each other. All the adoptive parents look at each other and well, what do we know? I don't know. We need to ask the experts in this case, which is adopted people, lived experience. Well, I'm very grateful that you shared your story, Cindy. I love your story. I think it's very inspiring that you've taken your experience, even though it wasn't one of the bad ones, you've taken it and have a broad view of adoption from all the angles, and you're actively helping adoptees and DCPs and LDAs and NPEs with Hiraeth and with your other activism work. I'm just really proud of you. I'm glad to know you. And thank you for coming on Unraveling Adoption.
Thank you.
Well, please share this episode with anyone you know. And for sure, if you know an adoptee that is needing to go on a retreat, heck, go find Hiraeth and send them on a retreat. And if you want to donate to a scholarship fund, can they do that?
They sure can.
Yeah, I'm sure you would take the money, right?
Absolutely.
And if any of you are interested in attending, if you're an adoptee, LDA, DCP, or NPE, here are the upcoming dates. The spring retreat at the Jersey Shore will be April 20th through 24th, 2023. The Texas Lone Star Rove retreat will be in the summer, July 13th through 17th, 2023. And the Tennessee Foothills Fall 2023 retreat will be October 5 through 9. Go find out more at hiraethhopeandhealing.com, and I'll put all the links in the show notes so you can find it easily. And find Unraveling Adoption. Our website is unravelingadoption.com, or just look us up on all the social media. If any of you are an adoptive parent or a foster parent or kinship parent, I invite you to join our group APtitude, a support group for adoptive parents facing adoptions challenges. It's free and the membership form is in the notes, or you can find it on unravelingadoption.com/aptitude. Lastly, we do have a Patreon account. If you are interested in supporting our efforts here and helping us reach more people, just go to patreon.com/unravelingadoption. And I want to welcome our latest Patreon supporter, Lisa Bay-Rosley. And I'm very grateful to have you on board. Thank you to all of the Patreon supporters that help keep this operation running. And thank you to all for listening. Please share this episode. And Cindy and I want you to stay safe.